So thank you for meeting with us to kind of give us a deeper look inside of your career and how your journey at Bain has kind of progressed. Could you tell us a bit more about your position, your current position at Bain?
Sure. Well, hello, everyone. My name is Rachel Yorke, and I am currently a manager at Bain and Company. Um, I've been at Bain for just over 2 years. I did a summer internship in between my 2 years in business school, so in 2017, and then I joined in 2018 full time. Um, I am a generalist, as most of us are in our first few years at Bain. So I've done a wide array of things. I've worked in hotel and casino, in entertainment, in private equity, which is where I currently am. And to give a view, I guess, of what Bain does, I think our private equity group, which we call PEG, gives a nice overview of what Bain generally does. So within that group, we help private equity firms think about the market landscape and the competitive landscape and gather some customer information around a particular industry and a particular company that a private equity firm is interested in. So we essentially help them make a choice whether they want to buy or not buy a specific company.
Okay. And how did you get into it? What about the field piqued your interest? And how
Yeah.
did those, like, what milestones led you to where you are now?
That's a hard question, but I will break it up. So I actually applied to Bain as an undergrad. So I went to Amherst College, which is about 2 hours outside of Boston. And I was an economics major, and I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And so Bain came to campus, and I was really excited about how they framed what we do. So like taking really smart people and solving CEOs' toughest problems. And I unfortunately didn't get it. And so when I went to business school, I pretty much knew that I wanted to do consulting. And I think some of the inspiration I had was definitely looking at many of my classmates. So many of my section mates were from many different firms, Bain, McKinsey, BCG, all over. And I just thought that they had a really good mastery of so many different things. So they could read a case, an HBS case. They could analyze it, perform the right analysis, and then on top of all of that, present their ideas in a super structured way, which is not easy to do in front of 90 people that sometimes you're a little bit intimidated by. So I was super impressed with everything that they showed in the classroom, and I kind of was like, okay, I was interested before, but just seeing clearly all the skills that they have, maybe this is the right time and the right path for me to go down right now.
Can you just kind of like high level, what are some responsibilities or things you do?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. I won't put it in any particular order. I'll just sort of list off the way that the time is filled. The first thing that typically happens is we have a morning stand-up meeting. So the team gathers, obviously today that's in a virtual world, and we set our priorities for the day. We say, okay, what is everyone going after? Let's make sure that we're aligned. And it's a really just great time for the team to reconnect. And we also have those types of check-ins at the end of the day. So we reconvene maybe around 4:30, and we're like, okay, how much progress have we made? What's our intended goal in terms of what we want to produce for the end of the day, later that evening? So there's definitely some times in the day where you are checking in with the team, you're getting that team camaraderie, you're also getting an update on what everyone is working on. In between those blocks of time, you are doing a couple of things. You are working on your individual work stream. So there are a couple of things you could be doing. You could be meeting with clients to get answers from them. You could be doing some data work individually. You could be working on what we call expert calls. So we do a lot of calls where we conduct interviews with experts in the field to better understand a particular subject matter. You could be meeting with your teammates to blank out some slides, like how do I want to share my answer. So that's what that chunk of the day really is where you're working either individually or with your small teamlet to better produce an answer. And then at least in PEG, how it works is once you've gathered all of this information throughout the day from the client, from experts, from the data work that you're doing, at the end of the day, we start to focus all of that into slides. So how am I going to present the answer? How am I going to translate everything that I've learned today into a clear and compelling storyline? And oftentimes that's what like the partners and your team are using to iterate, right? We're all sort of, not everyone can be on the call, not everyone can be, in your data session. And so, at the end of the day, your manager and the partner, they're looking at those slides to sort of assess, okay, how far along are we on the answer? So if I had to give it sort of a broad stroke, I think that there's a really nice balance between working with your whole team, working with individuals within the team, doing some self-work, and then putting that all together.
Great. And what personal skills do you feel are most important or like useful for your job?
It's a great question. I think in order to be a good consultant, there's a few things. I think the first thing though is being a critical thinker. And I don't think I understood what that meant. It's kind of a term that's like thrown around a little bit, like, oh, what are your critical thinking skills? Maybe it was on the SAT or something. And to me, what that really means is you take a problem and you're able to break it down into smaller pieces. And those smaller pieces are what you're going to go after in order to prove the bigger question. So first thing you got to be able to do is, how can I break something that feels really complicated down into smaller pieces? And I'm using my critical thinking skills because I may not know all of the context of the problem. I may not know everything about the company or the industry. So I have to think about, okay, how can I break this down into bite-sized pieces that would help me to answer this question? That's a super, 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 super important skill, because it can feel really overwhelming when you're like, hey, the CEO has just said that they are struggling with their profitability. Go figure it out, right? Like that is a very big question. Like, where would I want to start? So that's definitely a pretty important skill. I think the second is being a really good listener. We are in client services, so oftentimes clients aren't necessarily sharing things in a super upfront manner. You kind of have to really be a good listener to identify, well, what's really going on here? I want to really distill what you're saying to me and what the real issue here is. And so you have to be a really good listener. And that's definitely something that I work on every single day, because, again, sometimes you can get in front of the client, maybe you feel a little nervous. You're thinking more about how you want to respond or what your response is going to be versus what they're actually saying. So that's super important. What else do I think? And then what else do I think is important? I want to say something around teams. So we work in teams, we work super collaboratively. And so I think the skill around how do I work in a team setting, I'm sure you guys have experience with like working on team projects and you have one person that's doing all the work and one person that's doing none of the work. Like that is not sustainable in a consulting environment. And so finding the right balance between, I'm going to step in here because this is my work stream, I'm going to own it, and this is what I'm contributing to the team, while also asking really great questions of your teammates, seeing how all of that combines together. So being a good teammate, I think, is really important. And I played college sports. I played volleyball at Amherst, and I definitely do think that gave me a good foundation for what it feels like to be like, right now I'm important and right now I'm not important, and sort of knowing how to step in and step out.
Kind of switching topics a bit, like diversity and inclusion, of course, are like huge buzzwords usually, but like recently they've taken like a different meaning on, like how do you see these themes kind of playing a part in your work at Bain? And like, are there any major initiatives that the firm's currently working towards?
Yeah, so this has changed, in my opinion, pretty dramatically, even in the last 2 years that I've been at Bain. So maybe first I'll talk about my local experience, which is in Los Angeles, and then I can speak to some of the things that are happening across the US, which is also pretty exciting. When I started 2 years ago, it was just myself and a partner, Darren. Maybe you guys have met him at Bell presentations. He's also a USC graduate. And so it was just us two, which was like pretty wild for like it to be 2018. Like LA is a very diverse city. And I had gotten offers from other firms, and I was like, I want to work at Bain, and I want this to be the thing that I can really help drive while I'm here. I'm very excited that today we actually have 14 people in our pipeline. I think we have a total of 7 that will be full-time with us by the end of the year, and then the remainder are some combination of maybe joining us the following fall, or they are Bell interns, et cetera. So I think that we as an office have made leaps and bounds in terms of our progress on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I think one of the main things that happened is that we just started to have more conversations about it. So I remember my first Black History Month, I was like, guys, this is embarrassing. Like, how do we only have 2 Black individuals in our office of 180 or so? What's going on here? And it's not just my responsibility, it's all of our responsibility, because all of us are involved in recruiting. All of us are on teams. All of us understand the value of having diverse teams, primarily because we get to better answers. And that's scientifically backed, and Bain is very understanding of that. Like, diverse teams produce better answers. And that's basically what we're hired to do for our clients, is produce good answers. And I think after that time, people just started coming out with a lot of questions, like, how should we think about recruiting? Whose responsibility is it to be involved in recruiting? How do we make sure that if we find a Black candidate that we feel has high potential, is really interested in Bain, et cetera, actually gets to connect with the right people, right? Is it detrimental to say, oh, there was this really great candidate, I met George, blah, 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 blah. Should I say George is Black? Should I not say George is Black? Like, all of these sort of really, maybe for us, obvious answers or obvious questions, people are unclear how to navigate that. And I think once we sort of opened that conversation up, it gave us a lot of freedom to make sure that we were connecting with the right individuals and preparing folks for interviews. And the main thing is really understanding that all of our packages are different. So when we are assessing candidates of color, candidates not of color, what do they individually bring to the table? And being a little bit more understanding that there isn't some cookie cutter, like I mentioned, even with your academic background, there also can't be sort of this like cookie cutter, what Bain looks like. And I think that we've made huge strides on that in the LA office. I'm very excited about that. On the national level, a lot of things have happened. So we started a transformation office, which actually Darren is a part of. And the goal of that is really to take a look at all of our processes internally and ask ourselves, how are any of these missing the mark on supporting our Black population? So in our interview process, in our evaluation process, are there things that might have some embedded bias in there that we really need to understand? Are there additional training opportunities that we think might be helpful? And as an example of that, like when a Black candidate first comes, like we need to make sure that they understand the assessment process so that when they're having a professional development chat with their manager, they can actually understand what's being communicated, right? So I think that transformation office has been like a really big step in the right direction, because we are taking a look at our processes holistically. That's the first phase. I think the second phase is, how do we think about how we help our clients in this arena? So obviously we work in our teams, but we also support clients. And so we need to make sure that our interactions there are ones that uphold the value of our Black consultants. And then on top of that, there's been some other initiatives. So that's sort of internal. Externally, I think we've committed $100 million to supporting organizations that combat racial inequities. And so like that is a very big commitment. And it's typically through our work. So like we'll staff teams, which is, our greatest asset on solving those types of problems. So I do feel that this is at the forefront of what Bain is doing, and I think they're finally understanding what it really takes, the commitment level, the investment level, whereas before I think that we were, along with probably many other firms, on our heels about it. Well, if someone comes our way, we'll make sure to invest. Well, no, you have to invest before that. So I'm very proud of what Bain has done, honestly.
And what would you say separates Bain from other major consulting firms, like specific offerings? Would you say it's the company culture? Like, what are some of the biggest?
Yeah. Good question. Well, I can tell you a little bit about my process because I got offers from a few of the other firms and I actively chose Bain, obviously. The first thing, the culture point is incredibly real. The people at Bain, like we have this saying, a Bainey never lets another Bainey fail. Like that's really real. And everything that I have learned is because someone else has taken the time to teach me, from the AC to the partner and everyone in between. Someone has taken time out of their day to teach me a tactical skill, to coach me, to give me feedback. And when you're in a model that is essentially an apprenticeship model, you know, you're learning through others, you want to be around people that you sort of feel like, okay, these are my people. This is where I want to be. And I have found that incredibly true across the many different teams that I have been on. I do also think though that some of the camaraderie that we've been able to build it definitely is a piece of like the people that we recruit, et cetera, but it is embedded into our structure, which is different than the other firms. So we have what's called a home staffing model, which essentially means that doesn't mean you don't travel, but it basically means we try to staff a little bit more regionally. And if you were to go somewhere else, like if I were to go to SF, for example, for a case, typically it'll be a whole LA team deployed in SF. So the bonds that you build and the mentorship that you build, it follows you, right? So it's not like you were on a case, I'm from LA, but my case is in New York. There were people from New York on the case and Texas, you know, sort of everyone coming together, working in New York, and then suddenly you disband once the case is over. Everyone I've ever been on a team with, I still see them in the office. And I think that's what actually builds not only camaraderie, but an ability to keep a really tight mentorship loop, right? Because you sort of never forget about anybody. So the culture piece I would say is extremely real. In terms of work, I think that the firms honestly are generally the same. Like McKinsey is a lot larger, so they're probably going to have, you know, more public sector work, for example. They might be doing more work in emerging markets. But we're fairly on a day-to-day basis, you know what I mean? Like pretty similar. I think Bain stands out for its private equity work. So we definitely have most of the market share there. It's something that we spearheaded. So I think that private equity firms definitely look to us as the leader in that space. I know less about BCG. I know they have digital ventures. So if you're interested maybe in more of like a VC arm, but still being connected to BCG, like they might have a strong suit there. But what I would say is if you're looking for a generalist experience in consulting, and I highly recommend that folks at your stage think that way, because 9 times out of 10, most people don't know what they want to do. And sure, there's definitely that one special person that from like, you know, my college roommate actually was this way. She was like, I want to be a lawyer. I'm going to go be a lawyer. Then I want to be a judge. Like she has executed that, but don't know. And that's okay, right? Like that's what having an education has bought us, that sort of flexibility and let me navigate my career rather than feeling like I need to commit and like, you know, go full force. I think that the consulting firms are fairly comparable if you're looking for that generalist experience.
Thank you for that. And then kind of more specifically, what steps would you recommend for someone who's looking to pursue a career specifically with Bain? Like what type of opportunities, any contacts you may be willing to connect with interested members?
Yeah, so we are very excited about being on the USC campus, and I'm pretty confident that we have a lot of communication flowing through all of the channels that you guys already have, your weekly newsletter, etc. The first one that I definitely have to shout out is Bell. So Bell is our internship for rising juniors. So it's pretty early on in the process. You learn about it as a sophomore. And it's a week-long internship that at the end of you interview for hopefully a position as an ACI, so associate consultant intern, in between your junior and senior year, which of course if that goes well, you would have an invitation to come back full-time after you graduate. This could be your very first introduction to Bain, and I think it's really important to take advantage of, because again, it's that first footstep and you're like, okay, let me try this, see if you like it, see if what you learn in the info session is helpful. If you're interested, go for it. If it works out, fantastic. You're in the system super early, and that's wonderful. let's say you go that route and ends up not working out, you have another opportunity to apply for the full-time program, and you have a lot of experience under your belt, right? Hopefully you would have done some more research, you would have connected with people, you would have had one pass at doing the interview. And even if it didn't go well, you learned a ton through the process. You know how it feels now, so you can be a little bit more relaxed. So my overall advice is get involved early. Like, we are on campus, we are communicating through your groups. We have information sessions where partners like Darren, who are fantastic and critical to the firm, honestly, are there to answer questions. It's very rare that you get such, one-on-one access with someone like that. So that's, really great. And then my second is, again, it just comes back down to case prep. It is really helpful. I know USC focuses a lot on networking and being professional and polished, and I think that's really great. Use some of those skills when you're in front of us at the info sessions, right? Like, communicate your interests, et cetera, but make sure that you're prepared on the back end. Bain is not a place where you can network your way sort of, into something. It's just not how we operate. And so I think it's helpful in that sense to get on the radar, like, oh, we have a candidate, they're interested. We're excited about them because they are they seem to have strong leadership. They seem to be a strong Black candidate on the USC campus, et cetera. But once you get into that case room, right, or you're in that interview, that's really what's important to show. And it doesn't mean that you have to be perfect. I should be clear about that. It doesn't mean that you're perfect. It means that you're helping us feel confident that you're a critical thinker, you're a good listener, and you're good at breaking down problems. So my advice would just be to get involved and take advantage of all the information that's sort of out there. And our manager of recruiting, who's responsible for USC, her name is Megan Lohr, Loer. I think, let me confirm that. But like, she's the one sending emails. You should be able to contact her. Sorry, it's Loehr. And she's a wonderful first point of reference.